Great to see people starting to dial in. The list of attendees is growing there. Maybe Ryan, you could give me a quick note to confirm that that my audio is working. Excellent, thanks. Got a rather cold and rainy day here in Victoria, British Columbia, but yeah, apparently we're heading straight into fall. There's even snow in some places, which never happens around here this time of year. And great, actually, tons of folks are dialing in on time, which is another thing that's rare here in Victoria. So with that said, I'll leap right in. We'll handle a little bit of housekeeping, so there'll be time as a few more people join us. So first off, thanks for everybody for coming out for this event. This is the 7th event in a series that we launched in March. What happened is we were kind of feeling frustrated with what was going on in our business and trying to find a meaningful way to get out and communicate with some people and do some networking, and sort of figured that the best way of doing it might be to do some webinars that would help empower folks to do some work on their own. And that's so far worked great. We've had some really nice feedback on the sessions we've run, and yeah, I've made a lot of new connections and some new friends and clients. So that's been wonderful. So today our goals, fairly straightforward. We're going to learn some basic principles of content marketing. We're going to dispel some myths. We're going to empower you to create some great content, ideally, and maybe create a bit of excitement around it and some understanding of just how it works and how to approach it. So we're going to start by defining content marketing, and then we'll dig into it a little bit, and then we'll have some Q&A afterwards. We'll definitely wrap before 11, and at least 11 if you're here in Pacific time zone. We'll wrap before 11, but happy to stay on and answer as many questions as there are. So along those lines, as we go through, please feel free to ask questions, particularly if I use some jargon that's not immediately understandable as we go. But otherwise, we'll leave any larger questions for the end, just to make sure that we can get through everything. And lastly, afterwards, we will make a video archive of this session available, as well as send the slides around to our attendees. So with that said, let's jump right in. So there is a bit of a journey to content marketing, and we're going to go through this in a few minutes. But the first thing really is deciding what you want out of it. And I mean, it's amazing how many companies I see that clearly don't have a coherent strategy about what they want to accomplish with it. And to be fair too, I mean, if you just want to put great content out into the universe without thinking about the returns, that's just fine too. Totally respect that. That said, most of us are, especially those within companies that are tasked with sort of actually getting results from their marketing, want to really think about what you want out of it before you start. You'll want to have a look at an initial approach to it, because that's another thing I see a lot of is clients or companies going big right out of the gate. They see what other industry folk are doing in their area, and they decide, oh, we're going to do a massive effort and decide what they want to do without kind of going through a bit of a testing process. So really, I think you want to do a little bit of trial and error, a little bit of testing and experimentation, and have an initial approach before you jump in. And yeah, definitely test the waters before going all in. And then once you've kind of figured it out, at that point, it makes sense to dive right in. So by definition, there's a couple long, boring definitions of content marketing. I'm just going to cut right to the chase, and what I consider my practical definition of content marketing is basically it's providing great content to your audience to create trust and position you as the logical provider of relevant services. It really is that simple. I've seen that in practice and seen it work great over the years. And the big thing too is that this whole, I mean, as marketers do, we've kind of spun this into some, you know, highfalutin concept that's really complicated. And it seems like there's all this, all these factors around it that you have to master, but it's very approachable and it's very simple. And you'll see a million tools as well. You'll see all sorts of software tools and schemes around content marketing, but it's not about the tools. It really is about just coming up with some great content to share with your audience that's relevant to your business. So moving along, there's a couple other sort of avenues, and often thought leadership, inbound marketing, and content marketing are used and described as kind of being one and the same, but really they both mean different things than content marketing. So for example, thought leadership, in my opinion, is absolutely the best route to go if you approach it responsibly and strategically. And basically thought leadership is being known within a market and within an audience as being the most knowledgeable person on that topic. And that sounds quite intimidating. And in truth, I mean, to be a thought leader in a vast industry would definitely be a really lofty goal and take an absolute ton of work. That said, there are tons of specialties and niches. So even folks who are early in their careers or companies that are just getting started are really, you know, well advised to figure out something that they want to be the most knowledgeable at. And again, it is totally viable and totally possible to do that, especially in an age of the internet where any topic you want to be an expert on, if you're prepared to devote literally as little as a couple of weeks to do all the research on a very narrow topic, you actually can be one of the most knowledgeable people about that overall topic. Again, different industries, you know, you might have to study for years to get to that role, but there's definitely going to be an accessible starting point. And the big thing really is to decide what you're going to be a thought leader in, and sometimes more importantly, who you're going to be a thought leader to. And this is kind of funny. Get just a personal example. I mean, I've been striving for some years to be a bit of a thought leader in terms of a general web marketing thought leader, which sort of lends itself to where I'm at. That said, I see a lot of my colleagues in the different areas like SEO or advertising come to thought leadership and wanting to be like the most knowledgeable person about, say, technical SEO. And these are the folks that speak at SEO conferences and you know, establish a ton of credibility on that front. But in a sense, to me, it's almost a waste because they're becoming thought leaders to the industry, but the industry is not actually buying their service. So there's sort of an interesting distinction there. I mean, it's great for the ego. And perhaps if you wanted the best career possible, that becoming a thought leader to other folks in the industry is the best way to go. That said, if you're in a business and you want to actually get customers, probably you want to be a thought leader to your customers and not to your colleagues in the industry. And in that case, yeah, you learn a whole different set of language. I mean, or rather you avoid a whole set of language. Like, you know, I try to avoid too much jargon, for instance, and speaks on slightly more general topics and how different areas of web marketing relate to each other rather than getting narrowed right down. So inbound marketing is actually a concept that's been around forever. It's essentially giving something away to gain somebody's interest. Now, HubSpot's founder came up with the actual term inbound marketing some years ago now, and what it means in the current online environment is basically attracting inbound traffic and prospects through quality free offerings, as opposed to doing outbound marketing, like as sometimes referred to push marketing, like pushing advertising out towards your audience rather than having your audience come inbound towards you on your site. Now, the real irony around this is that the absolute the absolute single biggest way of promoting inbound marketing has come to be through outbound advertising. So it's kind of a funny little dichotomy or irony there, but it is what it is. And interestingly too, inbound marketing isn't always content. It can be freebies. In the case of HubSpot, something that's interesting, I've been following them very closely right since they got started. And I would actually have to say that the quality of their content marketing has gone downhill over that time. It's not as good as it used to be out of the gate. They still do a great job promoting it, and there's still some value there. But on the flip side, I think what's become their main pillar of inbound marketing is their free CRM. They actually have a great customer relationship management system that is 100% free. In fact, we've been using it for about 1.5 years now within our business. And I mean, we've used Salesforce, we've used Pipedrive, we've used a number of paid options. And HubSpot has actually been our favorite option of any, and it's free. And that's a great way, again, they get people into their ecosystem and then grow the relationship from there. So it's sort of inbound marketing. So I'm going to jump into some personal stuff and really just to sort of share some real examples and also to show how accessible content marketing is. And so going back to 1990s Rob, at that point, I was a recently graduated student, honors in English, thought I was going to be a writer, actually. Discovered that writing feature stories for the Saanich News at $15 an article was probably not my road to riches. So I actually took took an in-person day-long seminar at Camosun through continuing education from a fellow named George Sorenko, who was actually a prairies farmer who became known as a national authority on investing. And he was so mystified by this happening. It happened after he wrote a book on his style of investing and became this national authority. And he became sort of fascinated with the process of how that had happened. So he actually reverse engineered how he had become a thought leader and taught courses on it. So I, thank goodness, I just out of the blue realized I was going nowhere with what I was hoping to do as a career. And so went and saw George's session at Camosun, and it all made sense. And he also talked about this desktop publishing thing, which in the 90s, basically doing pre-press, setting up newsletters, documents, flyers, brochures, all that stuff. And that seemed to me like a way more exciting thing than just writing. A, because it had gear that went with it, computers and printers and all sorts of stuff. And then B, just simply because, then we can write and publish. And so anyhow, learning those lessons, I ended up in a digital print shop very similar to what you'd see in a Kinko's in the US these days. I had a digital print shop and started doing my own content marketing. And so these are actually pictures of a couple of the little books. Now they'd be PDFs, but a couple of the tiny little booklets that I did. You notice they say Hillside Printing on them because they actually bought us out before I got out of printing and into tech. But nonetheless, it very straightforward. We would have these things on our counter. We'd take them out if we went on sales calls, used this example of our knowledge to attract clients that needed to learn how to do some of this stuff. So, you know, our top 10 tips for looking good and saving money in print, that actually turned into as well a presentation that I did to business groups. And it worked great. So, and this is where I'd say content marketing and thought leadership is the absolute best tool for an introverted salesperson like myself. Again, in a business, in a tough industry, in a very competitive city, we actually leveraged this style of marketing, this content marketing and thought leadership into becoming the fastest growing company in our industry at that time. Sadly, that still didn't mean there was a whole lot of money in it, but hey, here we are. Just another thing just another quick example of after getting out of the print industry, selling our company, going to work for the company that bought us for a year or so, I got hired by this great software company called ACD Systems that was here in Victoria. And fortunately at that time, despite not having any experience, I got hired to lead up their email marketing program. Kind of a different time. At that point, I was actually allowed to work on it and research it and study it and get providers for 6 months before we even launched anything. That said, it ended up working out quite well because we did, in the first year from launch, we did $1 million in sales through email, and then went to 2 million the second year, 3 million the third year. And after that, I was lucky enough to end up running the whole online sales division in the company at that point. But basically what this was all based on was, hey, we've got this great big email list. We want to make some money out of it. People don't respond that well to our pure sales emails. So what are we going to do? And this is the concept that we came up with, was this digital imaging news. I found this actually in my archives in my Gmail from after I left, but fortunately still the images were still working. So just a quick example. But basically what we did is once a month we had our main flagship newsletter that went out with some great tips for the audiences, photo software. So we had tips on photos and imaging, and we had some ads wrapped around it. We also ended up doing it in 5 different languages, had a weekly version. And we also punctuated it with some quite aggressive sales emails as well. And that was what really, basically the content earned us the appreciation and the right to enter people's inboxes with our more aggressive sales and promotions. So again, just another way of looking at the content marketing. And I will throw out there that email marketing is not dead. It's still, to my knowledge, the #1 highest return on investment form of marketing to your existing clients, with some notable exceptions that we won't get into today. With some notable exceptions, it's not a great tool for getting new clients or customers, but an excellent tool for maximizing your customer lifetime value and getting more, having more engagements and sales with your customer base. Moving right along, here's this is an example from 2008, I believe. Oh, actually, I guess 2007. I can see on the magazine cover it says 2007. That was our first year in business as Plus ROI, and this is actually one of my favorite examples of content marketing and thought leadership ever. We basically got free reign to do what we wanted with a large client who was creating a recycled wood and polypropylene material to be used for injection molding. Sounds very technical, and it was. And the real challenge is that folks in the industry were having a hard time using this material, but yet the sort of renewable and sort of green options were in huge demand. So basically their president and CEO at the time got introduced to him, and basically he threw down a bit of a challenge. He said, well, you're supposed to be the expert. What should we do to get better known and get some new business in the door? And so we got chatting, found out that he was actually going to be speaking at a trade show 2 months after we were chatting, and didn't yet know what he was going to talk about. We chatted a bit about the challenges of the industry, what the challenges of the customers were, and their challenges was getting these materials to run consistently. So the idea we came up with was that he would present, that we would do sort of a white paper, and you can see a screenshot of the front of the white paper, that we would do a white paper on injection molding with thermoplastic biocomposites, which is the fancy term for those materials. And so we wrote up an in-depth white paper. I wrote it personally, worked in conjunction with one of their technical sales team who went out on site and worked with customers. So got to learn about nozzle pressures, temperatures, diameters, and all sorts of crazy stuff to make injection molding, which basically is how most plastic things are made. Got to learn all about that, wrote this white paper, and then the president and CEO at this trade show, we launched the white paper, and he presented a summary of the findings of the white paper. What happened from that is that almost immediately afterwards, there are several hundred of the white papers downloaded by the conference attendees. Big win. We got picked up by, you can see Plastics Technology on the bottom right there. There's one of the, actually I took the photos myself as well over in Vancouver. One of the photos from the case study, they basically reprinted the entire white paper. They basically reprinted the entire white paper as a feature article in that month's Plastics Technology publication, which went out to everybody in the industry. And then lastly, they got a bunch of new partnerships. They got all sorts of stuff around this, out of this. Just again, one of the most successful examples I can think of. And the really important thing about it was that there was zero sales in terms of, I shouldn't say there were zero sales. There were lots of sales of the product, but the white paper itself did not push people towards their solution. It did not try to sell them anything. It basically just educated. And that education gave people the desire to have another go at using this sort of material, using their material. Again, earned them partners, got them published as a feature in that magazine that reached the entire industry. And again, if you were trying to sell while writing this document, absolutely would not have worked. And that's a theme that will come back around to a little later as well. Probably spent too long on that, but and then of course there's right now what we're all taking part in today is our current sort of experimentation and approach around content marketing. These webinars are educational content that have been put together. Our aim, we're pretty relaxed in terms of we don't have a sales team in our company, but in this example, we kind of thought we could find a win-win in educating the market and helping educate folks in our community. So that has actually gone extremely well. We don't do sales calls to the people that attend, but we actually have, this is our 7th webinar. And so far from 5 of them, we've actually had clients who a lot of people attend to be educated. And I'm so pleased about that. Other people, and they want to do it themselves. Other folks want to learn a little bit about it, but then want some help with it. So again, that's just our example of our content marketing / inbound marketing / thought leadership. And in our case, it's worked so well that we now have decided to make this a regular monthly thing. And this have a calendar that's going to go well into 2021 at this point. And I think it's going to be sort of the mainstay of our efforts moving forwards. So there are some myths of content marketing. I think I'm going to need a sip of coffee before I tackle them. Also, just having a quick look. I don't see any questions popping up in chat yet, so that's great. Either I'm boring you to death or everything's been quite clear. We'll go with the former. So some myths of content marketing, and I hear this all the time, is that, oh, well, I'm working on my SEO, I'm posting fresh content to my site every month. That's going to be improved. I'm doing SEO. That doesn't work. Put it this way, fresh content is better than not having fresh content, but the only way that this regular posting is actually going to improve your search engine optimization is if it's part of a sophisticated strategy. Just simply posting without thinking about it or without a meaningful strategy behind it just simply doesn't work. And in North America, there will have been literally millions of hours invested in people doing this for no particular reason. Other times I hear people definitively saying, oh, you need to post weekly, or you need to post twice a month, or you need to do this or that. There really is no right schedule. The schedule is whatever works for you, whatever allows you to have enough time to write or create a meaningful piece of content, and also to dedicate appropriate time and resources to promote it. I mean, if you decide you're going to have a monthly newsletter, then hey, there is a bit of a rate schedule around that. You have to send it monthly, which I've learned the hard way can be quite challenging. But the other thing too is that just basically along those lines, I would much rather see a company or individual get much better results if once a year they did a fantastic piece of content and then promoted it, versus doing, oh, I did 52 weeks. I did 26 content pieces this year. I hit my schedule. Isn't that great? Not if it's not great quality. Again, doing that once a year thing is better than doing the scheduled approach. So people also think, oh yeah, well, I'm writing and posting stuff on my blog. People are going to see it. Nope. I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, we have, well, you know what? Rather than picking on anybody else, I'll give our own example. We have a relatively popular newsletter for a company our size. I think we've got around 1,000 subscribers in it. At this point, if I write a blog post and just put it in the newsletter, I would say maybe about 40 people will read it. And that's more or less everybody that reads it, unless you promote it. Now, the exception, of course, is we have had a few real breakthroughs in terms of search engine optimization with our posts. Some of them on purpose, some of them by luck. I mean, we've got one post on Google Analytics that's been seen, I think 16 or 17,000 times. It's been read now because it's showing up in search. But that typically is not what happens. You absolutely need a promotion strategy if people are going to see your content. To the point where, I mean, there are some exceptions. If people are visiting your site and you're using your content as backup to be seen as credible, then that could be worth it in itself. But if your goal is getting people to read your content, simply posting it is not going to cut it. Already touched on the search a little bit. And the other thing is I don't think I've done a great job explaining this. And sorry, I got distracted just reading a really good question as I was sort of talking away that threw me off track. So, and Allison, we'll touch on that question when we get towards the end of things in the Q&A. So back on track, people treat content marketing like a tactic. Oh, it's something you do. Oh, I'm going to do content marketing. And that's really not how it is. It's really more, if you want to succeed with it to the best possible degree, it's almost, you've got to be something like, oh, I'm going to be a leader in community education on dog training or whatever it is. Whether it's you or your company, it's you want to become something, you want to be known for something, and really to think of it as that rather than as a checklist item, like, oh yeah, we got this week's blog post done, let's move on to the next thing. Really, it's about having that meaningful sort of approach that makes all the difference. And I touched on this briefly, but in terms of trust versus sales, and I'll preface this by saying that we, probably because I'm a chicken when it comes to sales, but we are kind of the least aggressive company that I know of in terms of selling and leveraging our inbound and content marketing for selling. So, and that works fine for us, but and it's sort of a situation though where basically I believe you can't educate somebody and sell at the same time. Like you just can't, because they're two different things. And I see people, in fact, if anybody knows a really good life insurance salesperson, I basically at a point where we have to move on because I can just not stand working with the person we have anymore. Not going to mention them. It's an RBC product, so I think we probably need somebody that is licensed to sell that. But essentially, they're trying to tell us the things that we should be doing for our best interests, and yet I can just tell the goal is to sell us as much product as they possibly can, and they don't really care about us. So, and again, this is where you really need to sincerely approach it from the perspective of, hey, I'm going to educate people. And you have to want to do that, obviously. So you, I guess, have to have a bit of a passion for that. But that's to say, though, that selling is fine. But I feel it's got to be done, well, first off, respectfully, but separately from the content. So as I mentioned in that white paper, that's one of the most successful examples that we've ever had. At the end of it, there's an actual break. And on the last half page, there's an area that's clearly distinct and separate that says, oh, this white paper is provided by, and it gets into what they do and whatnot, but it's totally separate from the editorial content. It's like the historical, well, in olden times journalism, where editorial and advertising were two totally separate departments that did not influence one another. Maybe it is my bit of journalism background, but that's how I believe it should be. And that's how I believe it actually is the most effective. And see it particularly with, I don't want to pick on our American neighbors and attendees today, but particularly with some of the more aggressive American companies and brands, they'll do white papers or case studies that are basically sales sheets that throw in a tiny bit of information. There's nothing wrong with sales sheets, but trying to call them white papers and fool people into downloading them on the basis of having great content, it doesn't work. You might win, you might get a few more people reading in the short term, but in the long term, it's gonna kill you. So all that said, as much as I believe you want to purely educate and help people, you do want to be a little bit strategic again. And particularly, I think a big thing, even if you're doing sort of broad marketing and not broad content marketing and not having super specific goals, at least think about, well, how can I become more engaged with my audience over time? And again, think long-term. There we go. So planning your approach. Let's again, think about like they say, whether you're planning a website or building a house or starting a business, think with the end in mind. What do you want to accomplish? And for almost all of us, the goal is, oh, I want more sales. But especially with a content strategy, like you're not selling through content, people are digesting your content, they're absorbing it, but there's not that sales element there. So usually there's some intermediate steps, and any of these can be valid, and you can do multiple at a time. But you might just simply be looking to build awareness in a well-defined market. So for instance, I know, well, hopefully Tammy's on. I think Tammy's on, a mortgage broker who's fairly new to it. And in her example, picking several neighborhoods and sharing tips on sort of home issues and financing issues and financial issues over a period of time is absolutely a legit and valid way of becoming the person people think of in that defined marketplace. So that's one thing. If you do simply want to show up in search more often, when people are seeking your type of services, content marketing is great. You got to think about, well, how does it support and integrate with my search engine optimization? You might want to be building an email list, and you want to think about that. And I'm embarrassed to say, formerly, we had a really weak call to action in our blog and blog posts to sign up for the newsletter. Basically, nobody ever signed up for the newsletter. Ironically, for reasons that are going to be obvious, this year, 2020, we had to actually get serious about doing some online marketing for our own business. So it's like, oh, well, let's fix up some of the things that are broken. Short aside that we are launching a new website, our 7-year-old one isn't cutting it anymore. But that said, we simply changed with driving people to our blog. We changed the call to action and made a more enticing call to action to sign up for our email list. And we're getting more subscribers simply as a result of changing 10 words in the sidebar of our blog. Again, so really, if your email list is a goal, think about, well, how do I encourage that? Even doing promotions to build the list. How is that going to happen? Getting qualified sales leads might be an opportunity. Might be something you want to do. And again, think of, well, how does that happen? How do we go between content and leads? And that'd be a fun one later. If there are people that have individual questions about that, we might dig into that. Submitted forms for sales inquiries on the site. Maybe you want appointments booked. Maybe you just want to build credibility with potential customers. I remember early in the business when I had more time than money and spent a lot of time doing in-depth blogging. I remember had a call with a fellow who was running a hosting company out of New York that I met on LinkedIn, sharing some content on there that I thought would help with a challenge that he'd expressed. And so we went back and forth a bit through LinkedIn. Eventually we got on a phone call to see about us doing some work for him. And I started explaining a few things. He's like, oh yeah, no, I get that. I'm like, oh, okay. And I started talking about something else we might do for him. He's like, yeah, no, I get that. I read all about it. And I'm like, oh, turns out he'd read all our blog posts before hopping on a call. So there is tons of opportunity around simply building credibility with potential customers. And again, you don't necessarily need to overplan, particularly as things are not going to go quite as you expect them. There's going to be some twists and turns. So you don't want to overplan, but you definitely want to make sure there's a plan for these things to come together. Another critical thing is identifying how you will measure success. And I mean, in my case, running our agency, I have the luxury of not really being accountable to anybody, with one possible exception. And those of you who know my wife know who I'm talking about. She's awesome, by the way. But how will you measure success? Most of us are in companies that don't have that luxury I just mentioned. So you need to show, well, did we succeed or fail, or how did the experiment go? So some ways of measuring it include like targeted impressions, like in the example of if you have a very specific audience that you're trying to reach, how many impressions did you get with your content piece? If you're promoting it, what was the cost per 1,000 impressions, which is generally how impression-based advertising is measured. What was the click-through rate? Click-through rate is the percentage of folks who see a headline or search result or post or whatever and click through for more information. So what is that click-through rate? And that one's huge if you're doing some testing that we'll talk about on different topics. Seeing what percentage of people actually click through on something is critically important as an early indicator. If you're on social media, are people liking? Are they sharing? Are they commenting? Something that's amazing now on platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram is if you're doing promotion, you can see, well, how many people watched my video past 50% or past 75%, which indicates that they found the information valuable and interesting. If you're driving folks to a website, how long did they stay on the site? How many pages did they visit? Again, if you're doing like more blog post type stuff, how many newsletter signups did we get? How many contact submissions were there? Maybe it's signing up for, if there's a related demo that relates to the topic that you're writing about, how many demo signups did we get? And you'll need to experiment with a whole ton of different ways, which is a lot of fun, or at least I think it is. But you do get to experiment and should build in an experimentation phase and find out what's going to work best for you. Here's the screenshot here is a funny example from this actual webinar. As you know, we're using Zoom for it. And in the Zoom webinar module, you can actually create source tracking links. So in this example, this is just one element of our whole process, but from the Viatech events calendar, we had 9 visitors and 5 registrations as of the other day when I put this together. From our newsletter, from MailChimp, we actually had 40 visitors to the Zoom sign up page and 15 registrations. From personal links that I shared 7 links personally and 2 people signed up. I think that's gone up a bit. We did a LinkedIn ad. Again, we're doing the experimentation every time. And it's like, we had 127 visitors from our LinkedIn ad and got 4 signups. I was a little slightly disappointed with that. I think if we really broke out the math, I think that cost about $120. If I really broke out the math and looked at customer lifetime value and all that stuff, it probably makes sense. But again, and then versus, here's the LinkedIn sharing one. We had 62 visitors from that and 19 signups. So I mean, clearly in that case, that was probably the most efficient one. Actually, I shouldn't say it was the most efficient one, but the most successful in terms of signups. The newsletter one was actually the most efficient one because it takes nowhere near as long as doing individual shares. Anyhow, too much detail there, but no matter what you're doing, you're going to find that kind of level of detail, there are those opportunities for targeting and measurement. Speaking of targeting, it's critical with content marketing and the size of the internet. You can't just throw your stuff out to everybody. You kind of have to decide, who do we want to reach, and then reach them repetitively over time. Some of this is really cool. I've been studying kind of the science of radio advertising a little bit lately, just simply because doing display and Facebook advertising, there are actually some huge opportunities for building an audience by following the principles of radio, which has been around for well over 100 years. But again, so who are you targeting? Is it a specific geography? If you have a general product or service, maybe it is just a specific geography. Maybe it's a specific demographic. Like we do work for care homes and in-home care, and obviously the demographic there is fairly, well, actually it's not so obvious. There's both the seniors themselves, as well as what turns out it's the adult female children of elderly parents who do a ton of research and planning around that. So those are the demographics that we would jump to if we're helping a client do content marketing in that area. Interests. Facebook, with Facebook and Facebook advertising, you've never had the ability to target interests so closely before. And actually Google has come on, they're doing great now. You can even target on the basis of what sites people visited. Are you targeting your customers? Are you targeting on the basis of professional information? Or maybe even now you can go and target, well, especially in an era where we're not going to trade shows, you can actually target people who are interested in specific trade shows. You can do retargeting of the people who visited your site or consumed your content in the past, which is also a great way of having a funnel strategy. And by that, and how that usually works, is you'll distribute content fairly broadly at the top of the funnel to a relatively wide audience. And then you start tracking, oh, well, who watched more than 75% of the video I created? Oh, who visited more than 2 pages after clicking on a link? And then at that point, you can create retargeting audiences of those folks who are specifically engaged and interested. And then, as you can imagine, marketing to them is dramatically more effective than marketing to the broad funnel. A couple screenshots here, just in the background for reference. Like in the example that's at the very bottom, it's audiences that you create in Google Analytics and then can leverage for targeting and low-cost display advertising if you like. It's like, oh, that particular client, oh, we've got an audience of people that add an item to cart. Oh, we've got an audience of all the cart visitors. We've got an audience of all the users on the website, all the users that looked at 3 or more pages. Oh, and here's ones that completed goal number 15 and goal number 16, which are goals that you can set up through analytics. Interestingly, we're going to do an analytics session next month for those that are interested. They'll get into how to do that sort of thing. And then there's my screenshot from Facebook. Some of these were just examples. Other ones are ones that we have actually marketed to. It's like, oh, marketers, job titles. You can pick people in a specific geography that have specific professional interests. Oh, there's, if you're targeting vegan bodybuilders in the UK, hey, there's an audience for you. Here's a funny example of rich Oprah lovers in Facebook. You can quite cost effectively reach 60,000 women of the age 50 to 60 who are in the top 10% of household income zip codes in the States, if that were of interest to you. Again, deciding, and I'm speaking specifically a little bit on the paid here, but the unpaid or organic targeting is just as important to know who you're going to talk to and figure out how you're going to get in front of them. And a big thing too is how are you going to offer value to your audience? It's generally education or entertainment. I think you can guess which one we sort of lean towards, which is obviously entertainment. If you're in a more consumer offering versus business to business, then entertainment is also an option. I'm kind of cracking up because there's an example of a construction company that I know of that basically posts like inspirational quotes every single day from their feed. Nobody ever likes them, nobody ever engages with them, but they've been doing that for like 1.5 years, and it just absolutely kills me. and the big challenge with entertainment is, and I will say entertainment is easier to get clicks and engagement with, but if there's no relevance to your offering, then you're not adding any value. There is no strategy in that case. Like, oh, hey, we got 50 visits and 20 clicks and whatnot. That's great. But again, is that relevant to your goals and what you're trying to accomplish? And then looking at that audience is what can you share that's relevant to them and relevant to what you offer? And that's basically the golden ticket there is aligning those two things really nicely. And basically looking for the win-win. A content marketing offer where you're making people jump through hoops for content that's not, pardon me, content marketing where you're doing an offering that makes people jump through hoops, or you're following up with a painful sales call. Those aren't really great for your brand, aren't really going to be great for the long term. So just example, how can we give clients, or rather our audience, how can we give our audience helpful information that they want to receive while positively influencing their opinion of us and hopefully having them want to come to us? Basically, if you can find that win-win with the two relevance, we got R squared and W squared. I think I'll trademark that, or RW squared or something like that, with the relevant, and win-win. If you can get that, you're on track to a great content marketing effort. So one question that comes up, and it's interesting because I've worked in all these situations. Sometimes a smaller team is actually better. Having even one individual expert who can create great material is better than a team of people turning out garbage. But basically, what resources are available? Because it's funny too. I've worked in when I was sort of a little more naive. I would help clients build out this huge content plan, and then it's like, oh, and then at the end of it, we're all excited about it. And then at the end of it, they're kind of like, oh, yeah, no, this is great, but I don't think I'm really going to have time for this. So you really want to think about this up front, because it also has to do with what sort of content you're going to create. So, I mean, in our case, I'm sort of doing these webinars, significant investment, but we found it's well worth doing it. Other folks, quick tips might be something you do. Looking at, who on your team has video creation skills. Do you have a writer on the team? All these things are really important to figure out before you start, and then weave that into all the other elements we've been talking about. And then sort of the last note in these series of questions I'm asking is how are you actually going to promote your content? Because again, it's not getting out there by itself. It just isn't. So there's social media, of course. There's a sample of the LinkedIn ad that we ran for this particular thing. Sort of okay results. LinkedIn's interesting because they now have their articles, and doing an article, and I want to say that I want to say that organically things just get picked up, and sometimes that happens, but I think there's sort of meeting it in the middle there. And if you write a post, say on LinkedIn, or it could be any of the social media platforms, same thing applies. If you write something that's of value and you have some colleagues that would be interested in it, invite them to read it and comment. Just say, totally valid, totally legit. I mean, you can't and shouldn't force people to read your comment, but just like, oh, hey, Janice, if you had a moment, I wrote something that I think you'd find interesting and probably will have an opinion on. If you have a moment, please have a read through and please feel free to make a comment. Doing that sort of thing can make these things work just exponentially better. So that's one thing. Paid content. In our agency with clients we work with now, we basically don't write blog posts for people anymore unless they are willing to pay at least a tiny bit to promote it, to get some engagement and some momentum for the pieces. It's almost just not worth it. The reach and the natural reach in social media is so low these days that you really need to pay at least a little bit and get the ball rolling. Even $20 in Facebook can get things started. Do you have a newsletter? Are you going to do some other advertising? All these are questions that have to get answered. So I'm being mindful of the time, and we're doing well, but I do want to leave some room for questions. So we're going to move a little quickly through the rest of the stuff. So again, setting a strategic plan. So knowing your desired results, knowing all those things that we just covered, you might put a bit of a plan together. And so here's a theoretical one for if we were to step up our marketing to law firms, which is an area that we do for a bit of work in. So if our goal is to become known as legal profession, to legal professionals in British Columbia as the premier legal marketing agency, what we'll look at is we'll target all the legal professionals on LinkedIn and Facebook, which you can see over to the right. There's 2,300 of them on Facebook, 31,000 of them on LinkedIn. Those are actually quite affordable numbers to reach. So I should probably give myself a kick in the butt and actually get to work on doing this. But that said, so we've identified what we want to do, who we're going to target. How are we going to do it? Well, hey, let's do a series of short videos with legal marketing tips. And then what we'll do with that is we'll measure success in terms of the number of people that watch those tips past the 75% point. And then what we'll do to really sort of narrow things down and get to the point of actually landing some prospective clients to get people through an inbound thing is for everybody who watched past 75%, let's target them and do a legal marketing PDF guide that people have to sign up for. Once they've signed up for it, they're in our marketing ecosystem, off to the races, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's a personalized follow-up to them, whether it's drip marketing, using some marketing automation. That's kind of like, hey, there's a bit of a coherent plan for how we hope to move things along. So, I mean, it's interesting, like if you were to look at a large company that had a lot of resources to dedicate to it, sort of a fully fleshed out plan might look like, hey, we're doing some blogging, possibly doing some video as well as the blogging. We're leveraging our regular email newsletter to pump that content out to our existing audience. We're optimizing that content for search. It's funny, that's a thing that I get on is people saying, oh, we're going to SEO optimize it. It's like, well, the O in SEO is optimized, so it's kind of redundant, but I digress. We're going to leverage this content in our social media. And quite frankly, a good content strategy is necessary to have a good social strategy, because if you're not sharing content through your social channels, what the hell are you sharing? Like basically, oh, are you just talking about yourself nonstop, trying to sell stuff? So essentially, yeah, again, critical for that. You can use this content in your ad funnel, like I described with the lawyers. You could do podcasts like my friend Mike, who I think is probably still on. Oh no, Mike's dropped off. Mike. So yeah, I can do podcasts. I can do public speaking, or at least be able to do public speaking once again down the road. You can post things on YouTube. You can use this content. Successful blog posts can scale up into inbound. That's what you use for the topics for your inbound lead generation, doing white papers and case studies. You can do webinars, lots of other things. But basically, when you get right down to it, content, with the exception of search marketing for people who are in the market, content's the key to almost everything you're doing in marketing. So it's kind of funny. So now that I've intimidated you with this fully fleshed out strategy, there are lots of really easy options for getting started. You don't have to figure everything out. Great to do the best practices I sort of mentioned there. But first off, a simple one is just sharing some links to some great content on Facebook or LinkedIn. Just try some different subject matter and then gauge the relative response. Like you'll get a sense of what's working. You can do a few quick posts on social media, actually get into some opinions and insights and encourage some conversations. And again, just simply gauge response and level of interest to know kind of areas that you'll want to work forward with. Again, same thing, do some short blog posts on your site on different topics, promote them, and again, see which ones get the best response. And I'll share with you that historically, the blog posts that I spent the absolute most time on and were most proud of writing were some really technical, in-depth ones that tackled hard topics that I thought I'd really come up with some great findings. And nobody read those ones. So weaving in finding out what topics people will get interested in is critical. You can join online business groups. I've been doing this a ton since this sort of lockdown, and there are a lot of them: LinkedIn, Facebook, independent groups, and you'll see topics that just keep coming up over and over again. Write some posts to address those topics, and then you can even, in most cases, share those posts in those groups. Simply you can ask your clients or customers what their big pain points are. And again, you want to be sure to measure, but you'll know when you're onto something and when you're ready to expand into a larger effort. Some quick wins. If I know everybody's time is limited, so some cool strategies. If you have limited times or resources, curation posts are one thing, and that's where you outline. You might do a post on, hey, what are the top digital trends coming for 2021, and you can actually find different people have written excellent posts on specific trends and just summarize each of those trends and link to it. Way less work than writing an original post. And again, it's a win-win-win. If you're an expert in an area, you can identify the good stuff, and your audience is grateful to be pointed to the good content. The people who wrote it individually love the traffic, so everybody wins. You win, your readers win, the original writers win. Guest posting, there's lots of people out there that would love to share their perspective through your social platform or your blog or your video channel, as long as you have an audience. They'll be excited about that. Interviews. There's something kind of a hack that we do, not a hack, but that we'll do if we're not super knowledgeable on a topic that we have to write about, is we'll seek out some industry leaders and do interviews with them. And it's great for creating educational info and even for meeting some of these folks sometimes that might be hard to meet otherwise. Short videos are a great opportunity if you're comfortable doing something. You no longer need hugely professional quality video. You want to be professional, you want to be clear, you want to have a good space to record in, but it's very accessible now, and there's lots of opportunities there. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they are all trying to avoid becoming irrelevant compared to YouTube in the video realm. So they make sharing of videos really easy, and they also make it really cost effective if you are paying to promote it. So some really good opportunities there. And with that said, we're just about to move to the Q&A. Although first, here's the separated sales part I mentioned, my short break for a quick shameless plug. Basically, all I'd ask is, if you have any questions on marketing, digital marketing, I am happy to answer questions. And our team, got a wonderful team. 10 experts in different fields. We've grown quite a bit in the last couple of years, and so we can help with everything from building websites right through to doing complete multi-channel marketing efforts. We have our Plus ROI online marketing main agency that we do work marketing for large local companies right up to global companies doing digital advertising and international efforts. I think we now got clients in UK, Germany, Australia, just closing one in China, and of course, Canada and the US. And then Jumpstart Web does some really fantastic local marketing, mostly for local service and healthcare professionals. So lawyers, physios, chiropractors, that sort of thing. So that's the end of my shameless plug. Again, totally separated from the education.